Hey guys, it's Craig, and this is a response to Tim's video, strengths and weaknesses of, you know, yourself as a DM or GM, whatever you want to call it. I have a list here, and I'm just going to go ahead and start and expand upon my notes. My greatest strength is probably my ability to improv. Too many times have I not been prepared for a game session, and I would just have to just make up stuff as I go. Even on creature stats, I have to create up as I go sometimes. And I suppose I'm actually pretty good at it because the last game I ran, I didn't actually create creature stats for this one, but I basically just opened a program that I have, found a couple creatures that I wanted to use for the session, and took those and made an entire session out of it. I had the players go and save some dwarfs from some giants, and that's essentially the only idea I had when I came to the table. And after the game, I was like, how did it go? And I was like, well, if you had to rate me on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say? And the two players that I thought were going to criticize me pretty hard actually gave me. They said they looked at each other because these guys they think a lot alike. They looked at each other and think, man, 7 out of 10. I'll give them 7 out of 10. I said, okay, 7's pretty good out of 10, but what could I have done that would have made it better? And they were like, make combat more interesting. And I was like, okay. And then later on, I was talking to one of those guys, my buddy Greg, and I said, so overall it was a pretty good session though. And he was like, yeah, I really feel like the combat was a little lacking, but it could have been better. And I was like, yeah, I only prepped it like 1 hour before we started. And he was like, oh really? Then 10 out of 10. And that gave me a boost of confidence. Um, Another strength that I have is I allow creativity, but I also know the limits of creativity. I understand that people want to be unique, but sometimes people take an idea too far, and it tends to get in the way of the game as a whole. Like, you might have this idea for a really interesting character, but it's just not good for the game. So, I will help you to get close to that character, but staying in lines with, being useful and adding to the game. Um, Another one of my biggest strengths that I believe I'm pretty good at is I really try to make the game about my players. There was a small pocket of time where I feel like I was kind of making the game for myself, and my players were just there to help me enjoy my time. But now I realize that it wasn't really fun at all. I was getting the story I wanted, I suppose, but it just wasn't fun because I didn't feel the energy coming from them, so I had no energy going into it. And now I kind of keep a more open line story. I'm not as worried about the story anymore as much as I am about the game. Because at the end of the day, I can't think of one D&D session I've ever been in or seen or heard that would ever be a story worth telling. You tell the bits, you tell the little fun parts of it, but as a whole story, it's usually not good, not good enough to share. Um, but on to my weaknesses. I felt that these were easier to make up, just because it's easier to see my weaknesses than it is to see my strengths. I believe that's kind of true for most people. Um, but I I'm really working on this right now. I'm trying so hard to work on this. I'm afraid of upsetting my players. And what I mean by that is I'm afraid to do certain things that the game you come into the game knowing is going to happen just because I'm afraid it's going to upset my players. Like, I killed like maybe 2 people in my DM life, but honestly, I should have killed about 10 because I usually fudge my rolls and I'd be like, oh well, the dragon got a natural one actually, and yeah, that dragon rolled like an 18 or something. It's just I did not want to see my player die because I saw the, you know, the like I could see that he didn't want to lose that character, but at the same time, that is part of role playing. That is part of the experience. You know, you're getting so immersed that you don't want to see your character go, but that's part of it. You know. Um, Another weakness I have is I have a really hard time being strict. Like when my player pulls out a phone or something, you know, I kind of just hope that they put it away instead of tell them to put it away. I've gotten a little better at that too. What I do is instead of having to say something during game, I actually printed out my own house rules for both in-game mechanics and for table manners. And one of them says, if you have any electronic out, it better be for the game. If it's not for the game, I'm going to give you negatives, like hardcore negatives, in the game. And if it just keeps going on, then I'm probably just going to kick you out of the table. Just because you do not need to be on Facebook or Tumblr or anything like that, or YouTube or whatever, while we're trying to game. It's just, you're not there for the reason we're there. So why are you here, you know? You could go home and just be on your computer. Another weakness is I let real life affect the game, and sometimes I even let the game affect my real life. And I really need to try to separate the two. For letting real life affect the game, that's kind of hard for me because sometimes, you know, I get into these spells of depression, you know, and it makes it hard for me to really get into the game, you know, when I DM. It makes it hard for me to really portray the characters, to get interested in what my players are doing, to show enthusiasm in general. It gets hard. And on the other side, letting the game affect me in real life, it tends to be more when I'm a player, but sometimes even when I'm a DM. But an example could be like as a player, like when I feel that another player's character is doing nothing but getting in my character's way the entire time, I kind of feel like the player might be doing that on purpose. Because as where you are playing your character, you also have control over that character. I try not to be completely in character if it affects the other players. And I try not to make characters like that in the first place. I don't really care for characters who like the player's concept for that character requires other players to I can't even think of the word. I'm really bad with words. But if it affects the other players in a negative way, I really just don't like that out of any character. So I try to avoid that. Even lately, I tell my players that if they want to play an evil character, they have to be lawful evil. Because at least with lawful evil, you can create a code of conduct that you follow that makes it to where you don't have to get in the way of the rest of the party. But nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. I say we all try to do this and make this, you know, an ongoing response. I'd like to see what everyone thinks, and maybe even comment below if you have any recommendations on what I could do to fix my weaknesses. Thanks, guys.